Yes.
That looks good.
Excellent. Right. Thanks a lot for that. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. I'm going to talk about plans to update the SyrphBoard. We're talking about release 2, but actually, as you'll find out, it's not going to be a big release. It's going to be more subtle and gradual than that. So Yanis and I, well, Yanis is around just to take any technical questions, but I'll talk you through basically a little bit more about what we've been up to and progress so far and plans for the future. So yeah, just to remind you that the session is being recorded for those who couldn't make it. If you want to, please feel free to interrupt, but if you're not speaking, then it'd be great if you could mute your microphone just so that we don't get a load of background noise, and feel free to post questions in the chat as well, but there'll be lots of opportunity and we want it to be quite discursive, so feel free to chip in or ask questions at any point, okay? So we're going to cover the background, we're going to look at progress to date and some key stats, we'll get a bit of a discussion going about some of the feedback you've already given us, and then I guess we've got some suggestions for what we think would be good in release 2, but obviously it needs to be driven by the users, so we're really keen to hear from you. So just a bit of background on what SyrphBoard is. The aim was to make it easier for the regular recording of hoverflies. We also wanted to make sure that the records were secured. We'd heard stories of people having lost whole spreadsheets, having kept them for a long time and lost all those records. So being able to hold them centrally in a way that's backed up and secure. And also that helps support some of the validation and the data quality aspects when you're entering the data. But also to be able to add in new functionality and collect new data, such as time of day, weather, and sort of nil returns, and that's kind of to support some of the work around hot weather and the potential impacts on hovers through different parts of the day. But there's scope for lots of other data entry, as we'll talk to in a bit later on. And then the key aspect of these records that you submit to the hoverfly recording scheme, they're your records. Okay, so the idea is that you should be able to get access to them, be able to export them, use them for your own purposes, but also we wanted to provide some tools that made it possible for you to really get to grips with and to be able to understand how you might use those in your day-to-day work. In your day-to-day activity. So, something that supports you in if you want to do new things with them. So, plotting maps and doing summaries and looking at, first and last records and that sort of thing. And then ultimately, obviously, a good goal is to, or a key goal was to get the data into the hoverfly recording scheme database and then onto MBN eventually, so that the records can be used because they're very valuable and inform sort of conservation and long-term planning and so on. So that's the background. The aim is not to, though, replace other methods of recording. So if if people are happy with recording spreadsheets and so on, then they're perfectly happy to continue with that, and also using iRecord and whatnot. But this is really designed for to make life easier and to make it easier for us to take the records into the recording scheme database. So the existing system has these novel data entry tools that just allow you to select and find species quickly. So that includes lists of the most recently seen, those that are seen most frequently in the hoverfly recording scheme database. And basically you'll be able to search for individual species or look at these tabs and quickly click on the ones that you need and then enter information about them. So that's the number, the gender or life stage, whether it was a visual observation, a photographic record or a specimen, who verified it, and then comments and links out to Facebook. So that was the one of the advantages, was that entering data is quite quick, and it also allows you to link back to the Facebook site to show those connections to the IDs from Chris and Roger and co. But yeah, the other aspects, as I say, were to try to create an initial version that we can then build on, and the functionality, as you can see on the right hand side, allows us to do recording of times, and we also have this map to do entry of sites so that we can do that in a consistent way, so we don't have errors with grid references and that sort of thing. So that's the overall background of why we did it. Here's some statistics to date. We've got, although when you log into SyrphBoard, you see the dashboard, which includes your own details and also the overall SyrphBoard's recorded details. So it says 45, although in practice some people just logged in to check it out. So it's probably about 40 actual users. We've got 25,000 records for the year since, I think we started in March, but some of them were backfilled. So it's a pretty significant amount of records already. Over 5,000 sessions, averaging about 20 per day. We've notched up 152 species, 38,000 individual hovers, and bizarrely we have 100,000 named sites. So clearly we've got a bit of an issue about how we're entering those sites, and we need to perhaps do some rationalization. But many of you have identified some issues with the way that sites are listed and how you're struggling to scroll through. So we'll talk about that in a bit. You may have thought that we've been relatively inactive since we launched back in March, but actually we've done 70 odd updates and fixes since launch. We have a ticketing system. We just did a quick sort of look at the things that we've done, and a lot of it is behind the scenes stuff that you don't see. Some of it you will have seen as the server's taken down or migrated, but yeah, it's quite a significant effort in the background, and we've done quite a lot recently, which we're working with Roger on, and hopefully will be available soon on the submission and final determination. So this is taking your records, allowing you a function to submit them once you're happy with them, letting Roger see that, and then be able to look at those and accept them. And we've got a number of tools that will support that. So this is stuff you won't have seen before. We have a couple of new buttons on the observation line where you can set the status to submit, and then when people like Roger, who've got a higher level of access, go in, they can accept the records or raise a query, and gradually Roger can work through the list of records that require determination, and some of them can be batch accepted. So things like Episurface boltiatus and other species that are easy to identify will probably get automatically verified, and then also others maybe that have a Facebook link and determiner can also be automatically batch accepted, as we call it. So the idea is that there's an interface for Roger to step through, accept these records, and then can click the export button to export the list out to the hoverfly recording scheme database. It doesn't go directly in, but gives an export that's ready to be loaded, essentially. And then also as part of that, we've got a new messaging system where, if there is a query about one of your records, then Roger can raise a question. We could make this quite sophisticated, but at the moment it's just a simple backwards and forwards messaging system. But there'll be the opportunity potentially to add an image or to do more. But for now, it's just, if there's a query, it may be that it can be dealt with. If it's a grid reference that needs checking or something like that, then we have that capability. So that's where we are to date. We've had suggestions for release 2. I guess, as I said, it's not really a release 2 in the sense that we won't have this big bang release. It'll be more incremental updates, which you'll notice and which we'll talk about more gradually. And that obviously fits in with our timescales, because we obviously doing this as a voluntary basis, so it will fit around our other work easier, and it will also mean you get stuff faster and can try stuff out. So that's the plan, is to kind of operate in that way, so that you get things as they're released. But obviously we've got a bit of a list now generated, so we want to have this session to discuss how we prioritize it and so on. As I said, we've got this ticketing system where we can sort of document, and where people submit things, we can keep track of that, and so that's what we've started to do for release 2, as we're calling it. But as I said, it's not a big release. It's more this gradual process now of update and improvement. So some of the things that you've mentioned were to do with usability. So it's like preventing the screen jumping backwards and forwards. So I think when you've drilled into an observation and made a change, sometimes it jumps back to the main screen. So we can certainly clear that up. I think, Paul, you requested something about defaulting to the My Recent 20 and not the standard HRS list, because it was more useful and that it went back to that afterwards. So we've now implemented that. I don't know if you'd noticed, but
I have. Thank you.
So yeah, that was done round the back, as it were. And then there was also quite a few people said about maybe adding some extra validation of records. So, you know, that it would automatically recognise that you'd put in a record of Viodi's lineager, for example, based on a photo, and you know, as you've seen from the Facebook site, often that's challenged, and because it's not usually possible to do that. So we can add more of those rules in. And I think also it was because it was defaulting to male automatically. So, you know, we can change the default on the entry here, so that it, rather than male, it defaults to adult, and then the user has to set it. But those sorts of automated checks will pick up those sorts of issues. The other major one was on the sites, and I find this one a bit challenging as well, because most of my records come from my garden or a couple of other sites, and at the moment in my list they're right down at the bottom, so I have to scroll each time. So we can definitely do something to make that better by you know, ordering the list of sites by most frequently used, or, you know, allowing you to sort them or group them. So I think, again, somebody was saying that, you know, so when I go on holiday to Norfolk, I might have multiple sites that I check out while I'm there. It'd be good to be able to group those all together and then collapse them when I'm not using them. So that was another suggestion. And you know, we also know that we can add some things very easily, like you know, an aerial photo base map to the location entry. So there's several other things, but at that point, I'm going to pause and just see if there are any comments to date on what we've said about the sort of feedback aspect and those particular elements. So did anyone have any thoughts or comments on that to begin with? Going over here, move this camera. No, everyone happy? Okay, I'll carry on then with what we were suggesting might be suitable for the next phase. So just let me share my screen back again. You'll see that. Can everyone see that? Sorry.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. So I guess the first thing, and this plays back to, you know, what we've kind of been hoping for a long time. So far, obviously, we've concentrated on getting the data into the system, but now Yanis tells me it's really easy to add these sort of visualization functionalities, because we've done the hard work to get the data into the database. So, you know, there's lots of scope to you know, add filters and visualizations and new dashboard elements for the things that you'd like to see. So at the moment, we had this mock-up generated quite a long time ago now, that basically you would have interactive elements like a chart or you know, species breakdowns, which you could then sort of see summaries of what's going on. So for this example, we've got, you know, the individual species, the total seen, the breakdown of males, females, adults, etc. And then also a visualization of when they were seen, so that you could start to pick out whether they were, you know, there was multiple emergence periods or just a single, you know, constant emergence. So we can do something around that potentially that will, you know, allow you for either all records or for the different sites that you're looking at to interact with the data in that way, and then also to then plot that information on a map potentially. So that was the first one. Would that one be of interest, do you think, to be able to do that species breakdown?
Would
Certainly would to me, yeah.
it be possible to do that over the whole data set rather than?
Well, that's a good question, and we're going to come on to that. But yeah, and we might as well deal with it now. So essentially, we've got all of our records in SyrphBoard. I guess it's how happy are we to share stuff. I personally have no problem with anybody seeing my data, my location, or any of that stuff. I think it's fine. So I'd be happy to share, but others may not be. So that was the first question, that you may be able to opt in to share all records, or we could anonymize them or aggregate them to make them less sensitive, as if they are sensitive, in the first place. But again, your thoughts on that? So it sounds like people are keen to see all the records, and there's two levels to that. So there's all the SyrphBoard records, but equally we have a cut of the whole hoverfly recording scheme database, so we could put all of the database in here and then compare our records, SyrphBoard records, and HRS database records. So again, I'm going to pause and see what people think about that.
I think you'll probably run into a few difficulties showing everyone's records.
Yeah.
I think that it's probably okay to do it in an anonymized basis, but but I think locations, I mean, as you know, when we have people on Facebook, there are some who are very wary of giving away their locations, and I think we want to try and give them some reassurance that they aren't going to be compromised. So so I think it's best not to that it needs to be anonymized, but that doesn't stop there being a set of depictions of, for example, so that you could arguably compare your own phonology or numbers with those that have been coming in for the rest of the from the rest of the group. The only thing that does cross my mind is that you might well want to think about your data in the context of data from the same sort of area, rather than, for example, if I compared my data with that from north of Scotland, well, it would be apples and pears. And of course, the other side of it is when you get a phonology histogram that covers the whole country, what you're covering is 9 degrees of latitude and 5 degrees of longitude. So that becomes, it's very amorphous, but it's also somewhat misleading. So, for example, those people that live in Scotland might get very, very disillusioned that everyone's seeing hoverflies and they're not, when in actual fact, if they looked at the Scottish situation, theirs would be no different from anyone else's, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably wants a little bit of thinking about.
Well, in principle, the records that we've got from you anyway, from the hoverfly recording scheme database as a whole, is anonymized.
Yeah.
We would do the same with SyrphBoard records for this, but equally, that we could do more internal things where people could see whose records they were if they opted in or whatever.
Well, if you could do an opt-in system, then that seems perfectly sensible. Yeah. So, but I think you ought to have to give the option to people opt in rather than they have to opt out, because that means that that no one makes any mistakes. I mean, if you opt in, that's fine. You are actually prompted to do that. If you're and you have to think about it. So otherwise, you've got total security.
And Yanis, there's no technical obstacle to that, is it? It's just a flag against the user in the database, yeah?
Sorry, I just lost connection and reconnected with you. So you were saying that we want the user to be able to opt in to letting his position or records being public to the others.
Just the record, just making the records available so that potentially someone could see whose those records were if they chose to share it, but only within SyrphBoard.
This could be done. But they could also be anonymized. So if we would like to aggregate them and see at positions where they are, create maps, I don't know if there would be any problem with that. Yeah, but yes, we could create an option for the user to say, okay, I want to save my records this way or that way, and then handle it accordingly.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
it was the anonymized bit that most interested the idea of having to be able to see the phenology and the species that are around, and as Roger says, more local to your area, because you're very aware when you watch the Facebook group that as down in the south you get things way before I get them here up in Norfolk, and then the people in Scotland must be even worse off. So yeah, so yeah, but that would be useful to see what other people are seeing, so you know what's worth looking for and what's worth where it's worth going to look for things as well.
Yeah, and it might also provide opportunities to sort of map the progression of things, as emerging. So, like they do with the bee fly records, and we can certainly do that. But obviously, people have to be signed up to having them shared. But if we anonymize them, then that should be okay. So
well, one thing to bear in mind with anonymizing locations is if someone's got a lot of records in their garden, that's often, I've seen other people mention that in other places where you kind of have, if you're showing them on a map, it obviously locates somebody there, even if you don't know who, and it gives some people can be peculiar about that.
There's a number of things we can do about that in terms of how we show the location. So we might stop them being able to zoom in to beyond a certain level. Or once it gets to a certain level, it just defaults to a big grid square. We can do lots on the fly with that. But yeah, okay, that's useful. Were there any other comments on that particular point? No. So let's go back to the slides again. Sorry, I'm a bit slow with this. It's not quite behaving how I usually used to using it, but let's keep persevering. So the other aspect was this. So we can do some filtering on that, and again, you could show those on the map. I think for me personally, because I monitor some sites for the Woodland Trust and the Eastleigh Borough Council, being able to generate sort of species lists and information by a site would be quite useful, I think. So again, that's something that we would be looking to potentially include. That's purely selfishly, and then obviously. We've in terms of the sort of overall dashboard for when you land, you've got things like total record sessions, number of species. We can do number of named sites, and then there's various other things. But would there be anything else you'd want to see on the main dashboard other than just comparing to the rest of this to the SyrphBoarders and the scheme itself? There may not be, but.
Andy, it does cross my mind, going back to what you were talking about just now about providing reports to, say, Eastleigh Borough Council or something like that.
Yeah.
It's probably worth thinking a little bit about whether, if that became quite a common usage, whether it would be a good idea to include a list of species statuses and things like that, and possibly short species accounts. So if you were sending a report to Eastleigh Borough Council of what you've seen, you can press the button and say, this is the list, but also get a little species account and a status.
Yeah, I was thinking that because today, obviously, Ken Gartside's posted about the Saddleworth hoverflies book that he's been involved with.
Yes.
And I've not seen any of the detail. I've asked for a copy, but I did think that obviously this system could generate something like that. And also, if you had all the hoverfly recording scheme database in there, you could generate something pretty sophisticated. I mean, that's.
Yeah.
We'd have to. I'm sure Yanis could come up with a standard way of generating a page for a species, and again, it's a sort of dashboard. But I guess it's just whether that functionality would be useful and where it sits on the list, because it's a bit more work, I guess, to format things. But we generate quite sophisticated reports, as I think I've shown before, based on these sort of data-driven and mapping sort of. Inputs. So
well, I mean, I think my feeling on that is that slowly catchy monkey. So I would start with just simply a very, very limited, this is a species status as we know it at the moment on the National Status Review, and 2 or 3 lines just saying something about the animal, if it requires anything. But that we're moving there into quite an interesting paradigm, and I think in a way that's one of the things to perhaps think about a bit further down the line, because that's one, arguably, you might actually develop that on a commercial basis with a commercial client. So I wouldn't do anything for free at this point, because it may be that that's exactly the sort of thing that you could sell to a commercial client that could then be added on at some later stage.
Yeah. Okay. We'll put it down as an aspiration, but certainly it's something that the database and our tools could generate. Let me have a look at what Ken's put together. And we might sort of park that one for now and come back to it in future. But I think we've got probably other things, but certainly the list itself is useful, and we can perhaps take it a bit further, sort of interactively, and then obviously to export and print is a bit of a different.
Well, certainly the statuses would be easy enough to give you a breakdown on that. I'm just thinking that we will have stuff from the Wild Guide as well, which we might be able to put in. I think it's probably a little bit early to say it, but for example, if you were doing a report, then maybe we could use some of the icons on ease of identification, or regional distribution, or something like that. I think it would be possible to do a number of things that you could pull out from a choice table and populate a fairly simple report, but one that's a little bit more interesting.
And if we had like people's photos that they were prepared to share, I mean,
yes, indeed. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's something we can look at, and as you say, there's potentially a commercial aspect to that, but equally, it might be something that we could look to get funding for, because if you could automatically drive a whole report from a single data source, I think a lot of people would be interested in that.
I think they might well be. I mean, it's something that actually Recorder can do, or used to be able to do, but unfortunately, and it's one of the big warnings that I would give, is that once you do this sort of thing, you've then got to update species accounts and statuses and all the other bits and pieces, and that actually becomes quite a big job. I think it's wise to start small and to include things that are likely to be reasonably stable for a long time, rather than create something that could end up being an albatross. Because I think that the species accounts, for example, in Recorder are a little bit of an albatross now, because they're so out of date. I mean, it's probably not a big issue for 200 species of hoverflies, but bearing in mind that this system could be expanded to cover all taxa at some point, then it carries with it quite an onerous component. So don't create a rod for your own back at this moment.
I know, sure, and I can hear Yanis thinking, crikey, that sounds like a lot of work.
And certainly in terms of those elements, I'm very happy to help to develop those. I mean, that's what we should be doing. So as and when the time comes, shout, and I'll do what I can.
But in principle, the idea of being able to summarize by site would be something that we can explore, and there's various levels of detail, is what we're saying. So I think at the very least a basic list, but when we come to that bit, we can see what's feasible without needing to go for funding or something to justify the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything to say on that, or any particular requirements? Everyone happy? Okay, so the next one was to do with visual summaries on records. So at the moment, when you actually are in SyrphBoard, I'm on the wrong screen here. I'm going to just jump back. Yeah, when you're on this screen, you have a few bits of information that summarize the record, so for each individual species, and similarly for the day of the week in this tab. I'm actually going to bring it up, it'll be easier. Just bear with me 1 second. It's on this one. Are you seeing that? Can you see SyrphBoard now?
Yep.
Cool. So on this one, I did wonder whether it would be helpful, because I know that some of these are nil returns because there's not a lot going on in my garden at the moment, but I don't know, without going into it, which ones are nil returns and which ones aren't. So I did wonder about whether we could include some sort of visual summary that said, you know, the number of species seen on that day. I don't know, maybe if there was a specimen, that would be quite useful for me, again, to be able to know where that occurred. But is that something that people would find interesting or useful to help navigate the records?
Yes, a little bit, especially if you've got several, more than one entry for the same day.
Yeah. Okay. So we can look at providing some of those kind of summaries then. Let me just scoot back. The other thing was to be able to sort as well. So at the moment, obviously, this is listed in alphabetical order, but being able to sort by records. So that seems an obvious one on the summary itself, and probably also on the records, and be able to filter as well. So, kind of pull back all the records for a certain species, just as we were talking about earlier out on the dashboard. It might be that if you click on one of these, it expands into a more detailed description, like the sorts of summaries that Roger was just talking about there. So again, does that sound like something that would be useful to be able to sort of sort and filter these lists? I'm assuming so.
Yep.
Okay, we'll take that as a yes. And then we also talked about sort of expanding for a particular species. So I've kind of covered some of this, but with the first and last record, filter by year, compare years, I guess compare to the main recording scheme information. And then this is kind of reflecting back some of what I showed you in here. So this would all be interactive elements, like so again, if you clicked on M for May, then you would see all the records for May and a different breakdown. If you clicked on the pie chart that was of the top 10 species, then you would zoom in and see the summaries for those. So we can make these interactive elements based on an updated version of the dashboard. And I think this is one where we could incrementally just drop little bits on and try it out and see what you think. And that would be definitely one way of doing it, I think.
Last time I've seen a record is always useful.
Last time you've seen something?
Species, yes.
Okay, that's useful.
I'm forever checking that in iRecord.
So you mean in terms of, like, so you
just you've just added something, but you want to know the last time you've seen it, because if it's one you haven't seen for a fair while, then sometimes you want to go, am I sure, or when did I last see that? And it just is a point which I often go back to one way or another.
Okay, yeah, that should be fairly straightforward. What else do we have in this? And then I guess there's also, your own activity, whether that was something you'd be interested in looking at. So, what's your activity? How many hours have you recorded? How many days, recording days were there, and so on. I mean, what I don't want is to get it really competitive, like because it's not what it's about. I don't want it to be like that. So it's more for your own sort of interest, just how many sessions did I log? We've kind of already got that, but how many days did I record on out of a possible year, and maybe that's of interest to some people. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of thing that should be maintained for people to use for their own purposes, but not to compare against other people. I think that would be becoming quite dangerous, and we don't really want to go down that line. But I suspect someone might want. One of the things that possibly people would want to do would be to ask the system. This is 2 or 3 years down the line, to ask the system. Well, look, compare this year's recording with last year or the last 3 years or something like that. So that's the sort of thing I suspect that people might find quite interesting. I mean, we already see people put that in their posts, that compared with last year, they're well down, etc. Well, some sort of visualization for them would be really useful, I suspect, and they'd quite enjoy that. And particularly if they were able to take a picture off the off SyrphBoard, and then if they wanted to post put a post on Facebook and say, this is the result of the last 3 years, and look how it's last year was crap, this year's brilliant, or vice versa, or I'm seeing an awful lot this year that I didn't see last year, same sort of thing. So I think that would certainly work for people.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. I mean, again, I think that was one of our aspirations, wasn't it, when we set out, that people could be using the system to kind of make posts and and share what their own experience is, because as you say, they're doing that anecdotally already. Yeah, that's good. And then, this sort of idea, I think, again, we've talked about the record summary. So can I see all records with nil return? So somehow standard date, order by date, entry date, species, just trying to make it what different ways of filtering the records that you have. And then, you might only want to export a subset. So in my case, again, just being able to export a list of records for those sites that I'm monitoring would be useful, I think. So again, I'm assuming that's the case for others. Okay, and then, because we're mappers, we're geographers, obviously we're interested in this one, which is being able to visualize the results. And obviously every record has a grid reference. We're able to map that at different levels of spatial detail, taking on board the comments already made about privacy and the level of detail. We can do that in a way that doesn't expose anybody or share people's locations that aren't happy. And we can do it in an anonymized way. We can do it so that you can't zoom beyond a certain level. But the potential here is enormous, because each of the records is geospatially linked. So you've got a site location, but you can also then use that site location to show species and do different groups of species even, so that there's lots we can do. And then also then add filters on top of that for things like temporal periods, and there's all sorts of things we can do there with little filters and chips on the edge of the map. So I'm assuming that would be of interest to people as well. I guess it would also support that that thing about people sharing information as well. So you might want to share something locally or in relation to other data. But yeah, that's something that we'd from our own personal point of view, we'd like to include, because it's something that's relatively easy for us to do.
Looking at your map there and your visual there,
yeah,
I see you've added a new tab.
Yes.
If you can go into the map without having to go into the ad and be a bit worried about accidentally deleting something else, that would be brilliant.
No. This is. Sorry, you're saying about.
Well, currently, to look at the map, you've got to hit add.
Yeah.
go into a screen which is
Yeah.
editable records on there.
Yeah.
And I'm always a little bit concerned that while I'm messing about with the map, I might actually
No.
else. And
It's
then,
a good.
so having a separate tab for the map, I think, just to look at it and maybe interrogate it is well needed.
Yeah. Okay. That's understood. So yeah, this would be read only. But it would be filterable, so you're just showing and hiding records. You're not editing anything here. So yeah, it's a good point. But yeah, don't worry, they'll be secure. And obviously, there's lots we can do on the back of that, and additional tools and different base maps. We could even, bring in layers, open data layers like the habitat inventories, or other information that people might find useful. Within the map, just as additional context to when they're visiting a new site or just interpreting their own records. So there's a lot we can do there, and give the option to export as JPEGs and things to drop into other emails or reports or whatever you want. So yeah, I think there's a lot of scope there. Does anyone have any other specific sort of mapping things that they might like? I guess the one of them might be the location. So for the mobile users, and that's one that I haven't actually got a slide on, but I meant to, but we'll come back to that. But yeah, being able to use it out and about. So drop my pin location on would be one that I would potentially add. Are there any others? Again, any of these, if you want to drop us a line later, that's also fine. We don't have to discuss everything here. This is an ongoing discussion, I guess. Okay. The other thing that we talked about last time, and I'm glad we've got Jeff Wilkinson on the call, was to do with recording early stages. So this is something that I'm kind of resisting at the moment, because I think it will take up a huge amount of my time. But it's obviously a lot of the really useful information that's gathered is from the sort of early stages and people who collect larvae and rear them. And certainly, again, the system is able to support information about larvae and the rearing process. And I think we'd be keen to add that in to try and encourage that data to be recorded in the system. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, Jeff, specifically on that, and whether you think it's doable, whether you think it's needed, or just generally interested to hear your thoughts.
Looks good so far, just at a glance.
This isn't a final field. I think it's just the principle of, would you like it, and can you help us design it if you did?
Yes, I was just sort of coming on to that, because I'm trying to get my head around creating a standardized spreadsheet where you're able to track larval development and then record it at the end. So I've got a prototype at the moment that I can send through, that has columns for all the information that would be useful to have. So the trouble with larval recording is that you can't get to a species identification with just the larva sometimes, as with this surface. So you've got one row of data which just says surface spur and all the other associated information, location and all that. And you're sometimes waiting about four months or more for the adult to emerge, if an adult does emerge. So then you're just updating all those records, but surface can be, split into your surface record. If you got 10 larvae, for example, they could be split into 3 species at least. So you're generating at least 3 more rows of data from that, or possibly 4 if you've got a surface that doesn't yield an adult. You get a parasitoid wasp instead. So the problem with a spreadsheet is you don't want to overwrite any data. You don't want to keep updating a row that you've put in previously, because that's a recipe for just mucking up your spreadsheets. So I'll send you the spreadsheet that I've got, I've worked at so far, and see what you make of that, and see if you can replicate that on this form.
Yeah. So the idea here, and that's really useful, actually, really useful background. So the idea was that we would have an entry where you put the larvae in on a special form. Once you clicked at one of the early stages, then you get a different form, and then it establishes a one-to-many relationship. So if you've collected 4, it's actually entered as one record, but it splits off in the database into 4. And then you can document them separately, so that when you come to finalize, it will then log all the history, but generate individual records, so that if it dies and then that's recorded. If it's reared and it's Pitropenis, that's one. If it's Ribesii, that's another record. And so I think the database would really help there, because you can establish those relationships automatically, and track the progress, and you'd be able to then summarize the sort of rearing process as a record in its own right. So we'd be able to give a hoverfly recording scheme database the information it needed, but also you'd be able to then export stuff out in a format that you would find useful, that would say give you all the rearing success rates and so on for different species. So it is potentially, I think, it certainly should improve on spreadsheets. I mean, we'd obviously have to look at the data model that you're trying to build, but obviously if you've got a spreadsheet, Yanis and I can take a look at it, and I'd be really keen to get that in there.
Yeah, that sounds pretty similar to what I've come up with. So in a sense, I'm nesting the subsequent rearings under the original row. So I have that one row of data which I don't touch or edit. It's the surface spur and the number of larvae, and then underneath the subsequent rows, I then separate the rearing history. So if I had 10 larvae, I'd have 10 rows, and so I'd have the outcome of each larva and a history there. And then you have a final sort of totals row, where you amalgamate. Say if you got 3 surface, you reared 3 surface larvae, you can then amalgamate those 3 into one row. See what I mean? But I can see you can get into all sorts of trouble trying to replicate that onto a spreadsheet. So it sounds like
Well, maybe we should bring Yanis in at this point to just check I'm not over egging it, but to me, Yanis, that seems like a fairly standard sort of one-to-many relationship.
Yeah, the database can definitely handle this type of relationships. There won't be any problem with that. Now transferring it to an Excel spreadsheet, it won't be that beautiful as it is in the database. So you will have replicating rows and things like that, like nested tables, for example, nested rows. But it can be done. Yes, we could export to a nested form. The database can definitely handle it easier and more properly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that sounds interesting. So just drop me a line, and we can take a look at the spreadsheet.
And also, if we are at the end and we know what's the progress and how a larva has been tracked, then we could create a record on the spreadsheet that each larva is different. So what you do it now, because you have to record, you have 4 larvas, for example, but when we do it, we can create 4 separate records that start with the status larva and then progress over time. There are different ways to visualize. If you start from the end point, so you have finished and you want to export, it's another thing rather than using the Excel structure to track it. This is the problem.
Okay. So the thing I came up with on my spreadsheet template was I have a separate column that tells me what I'm doing with each of the rows of data. So I can identify, and then I can filter based on a code which data is then ready to be submitted to the recording scheme and which to strip out. That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So I guess in addition to the spreadsheet, maybe some examples of how a record would work through, or we can have a separate discussion about that. I think would be really helpful, just so we know what the range of permutations are and how you want to treat different cases, like if it dies and you know, or escapes or whatever, you know, just how we handle that in the record.
That sounds great. It's just kind of a good time. It's precisely what we're thinking about at the moment. So that's great. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. Thanks very much. Does anyone else have any interest in this particular session segment? It's just that obviously I spotted Jeff was on the call. If anyone else has got any comments, feel free. Okay. The other thing that I thought about was, and especially this comes from the high frequency recording we've been doing. So in the summer when we had that hot weather, we did a few days where going out pretty much every hour during daylight and trying to see what we could find. And one of the things that I thought would have been useful there was the kind of information about the specific session, because you know you've got different things going on. There was like different amounts of sun and shade in the garden, and it might have been nice just to log some of that as we were going. But it did make me think also when we were doing the Caliprobola work, whether we could flag the session as a Caliprobola survey or part of the Caliprobola survey, other than just in the notes. So rather than it applying to just a single record, it could apply to the whole session. So again, I wasn't sure whether that was overcomplicating it or whether people would find that useful. So again, any thoughts on that?
My instincts are that there's a danger of overcomplicating things, Andy.
Yeah. Okay.
The only thing I would say is that probably there will be people that would probably find it useful to have, you know, a place where they could put a certain amount of free text that was, you know, just mental prompts about what they saw that day or general points, because it's always possible that people would kind of use this as their recording diary, if you like, and those sorts of ancillary notes may be useful, but quite how you'd handle that in the context of then downloading records, I just don't know.
Yeah, that's what I was concerned was that it might confuse the record itself. But
I think it could do. I mean, the one thing if one could do something like that, but actually, even that causes a problem. There are things like you do want to be able to note things like, for example, today I was out and we had one patch of ivy that was absolutely humming with stuff. Now you might want to put a note about that, but it's non-specific to the individual records. It's just a general point. I would say to you, probably don't try to do it unless there's a big call for it and
that's fine.
some good reason for doing it. That would be my gut feeling.
Okay. Did anyone else have any particular desire to have something like that? Okay. Sounds like not. So the other thing that I just wanted to touch on finally, because it came up and I've just created a slide for it, is to do with mobile use. So quite a lot of people have asked us about, you know, that it's not optimized for mobile use. And again, I'm probably going to bring Yanis back in here to say, you know, what we might do easily to make it better for use on mobile devices like tablets and mobiles. But, you know, it was never been designed at the moment to be used on a mobile device. It's just by virtue of, you know, most smartphones you can use it, and you know, certainly on my smartphone I can use it to a degree in landscape mode, but you know, you get icons crashing against each other. But maybe before we get into any discussion about that, Yanis, could you just explain what you might do now to make it more usable on the mobile? Is he still there? He may have gone. He's not there, is he? Okay.
It looks like you've lost him there, Andy.
Just run on.
I think he's
Classic.
done a runner because you've got a lot of work for him.
Yeah, he's goes by so what I would say, just from discussions I've had with him, because obviously we've discussed this, is there are things we can do to optimize what's there already. We can stop buttons crashing. We can change the way that it works, make it a bit more responsive for use on mobile devices. If that's of use to people, I guess the first question is, I think we had somebody that on the call that is using it from memory, but I may have got that wrong. So is anyone entering data regularly on the mobile device? No. Okay. So it doesn't seem that way, but we can definitely do something to make it better. I think if you want to make it perfect for mobiles. Sorry, I'm just seeing where Jens has gone. Okay, yeah, he's had to disconnect, so that's fine. Yeah, if you want to use it on mobiles effectively, we'd have to do quite a bit more work at the moment, and I don't think enough people are using it in that way for us to warrant when there's bigger fish to fry in terms of what we want to get done. Looks like, Yanis, have you just joined again? Okay.
Yes, I have joined.
Okay, no worries.
But
I was just sorry. I was just asking you a question and you dropped off. So I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to throw it at you. It's to do with the use of mobile devices. So we know at the moment that we haven't designed it for mobile devices, but I think there's certain things that you could do to optimize it, aren't there, to work better on the mobile device. I just wondered if you'd say a couple of words about that.
yes, the application can be modified to adapt to a mobile screen better. So, okay, these things that are long enough, like the recording screen, the recording line will have to change because it's not, it's not visible in a small mobile screen. But also other things can be done. So, for example, we could get the position from the mobile phone and directly, put it on the database, or we could use the mobile phone camera, for example, to save. There are numerous things that can be done there. But yes, definitely the application can adapt to be better visualized. So this is the first step, be better visualized in the mobile phone, provided that there is an internet connection. Okay, so this is the limitation, the assumption we do.
Sure.
And then use other hardware options that the mobile phone can give us.
Cool. Okay. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any further questions? Okay. Well, that's all I wanted to cover at the moment. I guess we obviously need to prioritize some of that. So, there's various ways we can do that. I mean, I guess just based on what people have seen today, there are certain things that will be easy to do, but are there particular things people are desperate to see in the near future, or are you happy to have it trickling through based on what we've said today? Are there particular high priorities?
Andy.
Yeah.
My high priority is still that fact that I've got too many sites. I've obviously got into them too. When I started, I was putting an individual name on every grid reference, which is I did when I was using the spreadsheet. But accessing those when it's just an apparently random list is a little bit time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability to either have some consistent way that list is ordered in terms of being able to find what you want, or the ability to order it yourself as the user, really would make life easier at the moment.
Yeah.
The problem is every user is probably going to have a different preference as to how they'd like that list to be. You've obviously got an alphabetical option, a geographical option, a most used to less used option. I'm not entirely sure what my preference would be. If the option was there to organise it yourself, then obviously that would be passing the buck. But that might be a bit more complex for you.
Yeah, I think it potentially could be. I think there's a couple of things here, and we've kind of touched on this already. But the first is just that I think that, and I'm guilty of this, that there's a tendency to enter the same thing twice, you know, or in a slightly different way. So I'd be like Titlark Cops or Titlark Cops, Chandler's Ford, and essentially it's the same site. So I think the first stage is perhaps consolidating some of that. Or giving people the option to consolidate it before it's submitted, and because the idea of that really was to help with this site recording by, you know, allowing you to aggregate based on a site name. But if we're all entering like variants, and you know, it's easily done. It's not criticism of everyone. And as I say, I'm guilty, and Roger's seen my records, and I think there was some comments about consistency before. Obviously, we want to A, clean them up, but B, to make it clearer what we mean by a site, and then give you the option to manage it if you make a slight variant, because you'll be able to see them and then say, oh, actually merge that with this one. So I don't know, again, I probably need to talk to Yanis about the detail of that, but in terms of sorting and different ways of sorting, we can give different versions. So you could sort it alphabetically, you could sort it by frequently used. We can give you different options there. But in terms of before we even get to that point, it perhaps worth us all exporting our spreadsheets and sorting them by site and seeing what tidying up we can potentially do ourselves first. Or that you can flag to us and we can do behind the scenes, because we can do various things on the records directly. So I don't know. Does that sound sensible?
Oh, sorry. Carry on, Paul.
Yes. If I know now if I'd have known back then what I know now, I'd have obviously organised my list of sites a bit differently. It's only when you've got a local pond and it's got probably 8 to 10 grid references around the edge of that pond. It's a place I go regularly, but I've got an individual name, that pond, and then normally a quadrant, southeast, north.
Yeah,
like
I think the coordinate gives you that though. So if you're recording it as a separate site, it doesn't. It can be still got at by the virtue of the fact that it's that site name and a grid reference. So in my system, for example, I've got Titlark Cops, but it's got all the different individual squares, but it's all Titlark Cops. So I think it's probably partly about us working out how to sort of advise people how to enter sites, you know, what we mean by a site, but then also giving you the option to tidy up. But, you know, if it's a massive job, Paul, we'll do it behind the scenes like we did uploading your records. You know, we don't want you to spend hours faffing about if it's easy for us to do in the database.
If it's just a problem of renaming the site or amalgamating several of my sites into one, that's easy for me.
Yeah, you just go back and basically change the site name to...
Is that doable at the moment? Or
I think so, isn't it, Yanis? Is that right? You can go in and rename a site based on... I think that's what I did. I think I had to rename... We'd have to try it out.
I think we can rename. Yeah, I think we can rename. We can take a look at it and verify.
But can the user do it, though? Can they do it? We should try.
But if you do it yourself, does it just change that one record? Or does it change all the records with that name?
No, just that one record. If you change the site name,
might
and
have
if you
lots of
match it
records that you want
perfectly to an existing one, it should then combine it. That's my understanding, but we might need to just test that.
Well, it would still be separate because it would have a separate grid reference.
Yeah, it will have a separate...
It wouldn't be this whole mass of very similar names on this list which I'm scrolling through day by day.
I remember now because I'd done this, and basically if you go back and rename the sites to the standard name, eventually when you come back in you'll see those other ones dropping off, because Yanis, I think I'm right in saying that it will only represent in that site list sites that have a valid record, yeah?
Yes, and if I can remember correct, it shows the site name for the last entered record for that specific grid ref. So if you have added a grid ref and given a name that it's more complex, then when you add it again, if you give it a single name for multiple, it will override it. We can check that. Another idea, Andy, that
Yeah.
might help is to allow the user to filter the visible records on the visible sites on the list based on what he sees on the map. So if you scroll with your map and you see, let's say, a visible area, then the list on the right can adapt to show only those sites that are into the visible map area.
Yeah, that would definitely help when you've got lots of sites, I think. But we still have this sort of cleaning up. I
the
think.
cleaning up.
But if I just share my screen quickly, I'll show you what I was talking about. So if we go into one of my records, if I go into edit mode, I've got all these sites down the list, but I've been quite disciplined about using the same ones and not having loads. But you can see for here, though, that I've got each of these will relate to this wood titlark copse. So if I wanted to rename this one, I could just overwrite that, write titlark copse in the same form as it's shown here somewhere. Did anyone see it? I might have missed it. Can't see it now. There it is. So if I were to overwrite that site with that, I don't think we click on it though, because it will then change the grid ref. It potentially will change the grid reference, I think. Let's just try it. I can go back and change this later. Yeah, so it will overwrite what I did before, so I then have to reselect. If I cancel that now, it won't do anything. But if I'd have manually gone in and changed that record, I think another thing is scrolling this, because I've got about 1,000 records here now, so it's quite slow to jump around. We may be able to collapse by month as well, just while I'm thinking of it. But yeah, in the record there, if I'd have changed that to titlark copse, then this grid square, my house, would, even because it does overlap titlark copse, would also be assigned to that site name. So by keeping them small, they're manageable, but it also allows me to jump around to other areas. So, like, mostly my recording is in Channers Ford. Here's Hoke and Mead. There's mainly 3 areas there that are hotspots for hovers, which I've been recording in. And yeah, so that's how it works. So they would all be classed as Hoke and Mead, and that's where the records would be. And then similarly for Avenue Park and so on. So that's what I was kind of envisaging, and yeah, I think that would be with the other suggestions that people have made. I think that would be really good. Okay. The other thing we haven't talked about is
would you prefer us, Roger, to cover the large area in general, or head for hotspots?
I take the view that what you should do is what you enjoy, because what the power of a big group is the volume of data generated by a large group. So I'm much more inclined at the starting point to say, you go to somewhere that you enjoy going to. If then you find yourself saying, but I don't know anything about such and such a site, or I wonder if that occurs all the way around this area, then obviously that's something separate to do. But I think we should really start by looking at recording as this is about people's what. Bloody hell! What was that? Pardon me. I just had a massive. I suppose it's a thunderstorm. It should be about people's quality of life. And therefore, going out recording hoverflies should be about improving your day out and something positive, rather than specifically having to go and do something. If it transpires that you're particularly interested in knowing something about your area, then clearly it's a good idea to go to more than just you know, the hotspot or your favorite place to go for a walk. But I would urge everyone to do what gives them some pleasure. You know, that for me that's what's going to keep people going. It's not you know, you don't want to feel that it's a have to do. It's a thing that that you want to do. I hope that makes sense. I mean, it's certainly how I try to look at my own recording, but I do tend to get a little bit caught up in the idea of, oh, I haven't been there, so I'd better go and do it. But at the end of the day, the important is, do I come back with a happy feeling? That's important, I reckon.
Yeah, I think that also on that map, it does iRecords as well, because I'm using iRecord to do the full site species list. So the first record or anything will go on there, and that will probably be a bit more wider than that. But yeah, I think you're right. It has to be about what you enjoy and what you can fit in. You know, that's the other thing for me. You know, I don't have a huge amount of time, not as much as I'd like to be out there, and you know, I have to maximise my time in the field.
You're just going to have to retire, Andy, but, you know,
well, yeah,
I'm afraid that's a few years down the line.
I think it might be, yeah. Excellent. Okay, so the final thing, and briefly, because I'm conscious we're kind of over an hour now, is to do with we have talked in the past about potentially using the platform to generate records, and again, this is something that we've still generate Facebook posts for, which then can be more easily extracted out. And I know we've got Adam and Chris on the call, so I don't know if you were raising your hand, Adam, specifically to talk about that, but we know we can do something, but it is complicated, I think, because we need to understand much more about what goes on behind the scenes with the data extraction team. But Yanis is pretty confident that we can do something in the SyrphBoard system that would format a post, that would post it on Facebook and still give you all of the interaction that you get from the discussion, but where once it's verified and so forth, then the you know, if it got a tick from Chris or Roger or whoever, that we would be able to then pull that record straight into SyrphBoard as an actual record and save the data extraction team time. So I know we've talked about it. We know it's complicated. It's probably quite a big piece of work potentially, but yeah, happy to discuss it still. So over to you, Adam.
Yeah, you literally got what's there ahead of me. There was the question, because I know initially when you launched SyrphBoard, it was put forward that eventually the recording team might move from spreadsheet to SyrphBoard. And I know personally, I was a little reluctant about it in terms of potentially creating more time for us, but having used SyrphBoard personally, I think there is a way forward with that. And there's those screening elements that could benefit, particularly Roger long term, as in, if we're putting the record into SyrphBoard, it automatically allows us to check that grid reference. So if it's in the English channel, then we know to check it. But I do get that's a separate conversation.
Well, it doesn't have to be. I mean, the simplest way for us to do it would be to enable you to enter a record on someone else's behalf. So you as Adam are a special user. You can enter records for another person if they've given their permission to do that and shared their name and details. There's no reason at all, I don't think, why we couldn't allow that. Or well, again, Yanis will have a view on how best that would work, but the principle is that, you know, you're being asked to enter their data anyway. Can we make it easier for you? That's the easiest way technically to do it, is to just let you enter it on someone else's behalf. The way that it works at the moment, though, is that we use the Facebook ID and so on. So we'd have to have a different way of identifying that user. The more sophisticated way, though, is to get people to use SyrphBoard to generate the post, that then allows you to extract the information back out again, and that maintains the link with the images and all the conversation. And yeah, so that would be a more sophisticated, and I know Yanis knows it's doable, and he's probably quite keen from a sort of from the research angle how that works, but it is more complicated. Again, Yanis, you might want to pitch in here, because we have discussed this at length before, haven't we?
Yes. I think that the more sensible thing is that if a user inputs the data into the SyrphBoard where the data model is consistent of what you track and what you record, in your community, and then have a button there to say, okay, generate the post. This way you will have your data structured, the post generated, the result will be the same, but you won't have the additional workload of extracting data from Facebook to an Excel or to SyrphBoard or to wherever, because the data, the initial form of the data will be the structured model that you use to record, your information. This way you don't break the community and the workflow that you have and how people perceive, understand, and the groups and everything. The Facebook everything is there, and you have the same result, but you have structured data and no problem on harvesting. You won't have to go to Facebook to get the data and put it. It will already be there. It's just that you will do it the other way around. Instead of writing into the Facebook and then trying to put that into the database, create the record in the database, and then the database will post for you. And it will do it in a consistent way. I mean, it will take the photograph. It can put the location based on the grid ref in a very specific way. It can add your comments. We can format the way we would like it to be, and it will be pretty consistent. So that could in the future be also content for a report, because all the posts will have a similar structure. I mean, consistency is always important. That's anyway. That's from the data scientist and developer point of view. This is how I would do it.
But you are going to need both methods, because there's going to be a group of people who will never switch to using SyrphBoard.
But it won't matter, will it? I suppose.
No. But having the people extracting the data being able to add it into SyrphBoard is going to be useful for that.
And is that still possible, Yanis, that we would just have to reroute their login or change the login for, say, Adam, if he was entering on my behalf? Is it possible to have both? I know you're not keen on that method, are you?
Look, it would break the authorization procedure. So actually, you would say that I am Andy, but I'm not Andy. So that's not how the authorization system should be used of Facebook and any authorization system. And I don't know. I don't find it a really good idea. Rather than we could create another concept like connected records on behalf of, rather than records of. It's not Andy's records.
It could just be a flag in the.
It's Ioannis records on behalf of Andy. So put one extra level of detail to that. So you would still enter it with your account, your information, but somehow it will be connected to my account, saying that these are on my behalf, not entered as me, entered as Andy for Ioannis, not entered as Ioannis.
Okay, I think that sounds good. So I think obviously that's a conversation we need to understand your world a bit better, Adam, because we just say thank you very much for the idea, and then it gets somehow absorbed and recorded, and obviously we want to try and help make that process as efficient as possible, but we don't want to lose any of this, the good learning that we get from that process. We don't want to remove the Facebook element, because that's the main bit of this group. It's the lifeblood, isn't it? So
it's a delicate balance, because it's as you said, there's many steps in the process. There's somebody put it on Facebook, then it's somebody verifying it, somebody recording it, then that data that we record gets submitted to Roger, who has to then clean that data. And it's whether SyrphBoard can speed up that process. But the problem is, if we've then got to start questioning whether people are happy SyrphBoard being used to submit that data, then it's again a bit muddy.
It could work in another way, like, okay, it could, I guess now, I'm thinking out loud, the system could read the last 10 posts show you into the application the post itself. So create a visualization. So you would have an add new record, and next to it you would have the visualization of the post. So you would copy paste in there. You wouldn't have to go through changing from Facebook to SyrphBoard and then keep a flag that this has been already processed because each post has a unique ID. So we could create a process that would help you identify each post separately and flag it then as entered or not entered and help you with the procedure.
Okay.
The problem there is that the posts, I guess, are not consistent. So one post may have in the title the name of the site, for example. Another post may have the species. I don't know. It's everyone, and it's. I think it's how it is that. It's not the same.
I think Yanis brings up a very important point that unless we actually had a fully compliant usership of Facebook, then it's going to be very difficult to work out how to translate a Facebook page post directly into SyrphBoard. And when you bear in mind that we have lots of people that we end up having to prompt, can you check the date? Can you check the grid references? All that sort of thing. I think that's going to be quite challenging. So whilst it would be really nice to get to the point where data went straight in off Facebook into SyrphBoard, I think probably the biggest effort we need to do is to encourage more people to rely on Chris and the rest of the team for IDs, and then to enter their own data and try to push the idea that it's not so difficult, and actually there are some benefits to doing it. But I think inevitably we're always going to have quite a big turnover of people, and consequently it's this continuous battle of please can you tell us which system you're using to record. I've lost track in places. It's quite tricky. So I have a lot of sympathy with Yanis over how he might actually translate that into something that worked.
Okay, well, yeah. I think maybe sorry. Go
Can
on,
I say something, Andy? Just one thing. One idea would be that the problem here is that the users are used to getting into Facebook and say upload the image, write a comment. What if we could create an interface, a simple interface, where they would do exactly that? Upload the image, write the comment, select the species, for example. Just that, but they would do it in the same type of information with a similar view, not entered in the SyrphBoard in the sense that they will have to, pre-select everything and put all this type of information, just what they would put into the Facebook link, into the Facebook post. Okay, as a very, very simple data entry form, and then ask them to make the post through that interface. That would be more or less like Facebook. This would help us, if we have 3 fields, not 20, 3 fields: comment, species, position, upload photo. It will be exactly as you do with Facebook, and it would create the post. It would do the same thing, but in a more structured. So it would be the same. It wouldn't change anything. You wouldn't ask them to log in to a platform and follow a specific model as we do now and complicate things. Just another way to post their information. But it's just a thought that I just had. Maybe it would be easier to point people to that.
Okay, I think there's a lot to consider there. Maybe we take this one offline, and maybe I don't know if I go initially through you to discuss it.
Yeah, I think that might be a very sensible thing. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent.
Sorry.
No, it's good. I think it's something that we want to try and help, because we know it's a big onerous task, and the whole point of SyrphBoard was to make the entering of the information more compatible, more accurate, and less onerous for people recording regularly. Yeah. So for people who currently do spreadsheets, hopefully you've seen an improvement, and the quality of the data that we'll be getting out will hopefully be better, although there's still issues like site namings and stuff which I'm always going to get wrong and forget, but we try and hopefully tidy all that up. So yeah, well, thank you very much everyone for your time. We really appreciate it, and thanks for using SyrphBoard. I hope you found it useful. I'm really grateful for all the positive feedback that you've sent to us. It's been really nice to hear, and yeah, I think we'll continue to provide updates, incrementally, but based on what we've discussed, we'll come up with a bit of a plan and then let you know what's happening, and we'll be putting messages on the system so you can see what's going on, and from there. But for now, that's all I wanted to say, and just to thank you all for using it and for your time.